Well, today, I want to bring you a word of comfort from the lips of Jesus Christ himself. And they are the words of Jesus to his disciples at a time in their lives when they were very afraid, when they felt probably like they were approaching a great big cliff or waterfall, unsure of what the future held. And Jesus comforts them. And you know, one of the beautiful things about Jesus is he always tells the truth. He doesn't tell the disciples here in this passage, hey, everything is going to be fine. Following me looks like smooth sailing. No, he says, there is going to be tribulation. There are going to be difficulties. But you can take heart. You can have peace even in the midst of this time. And that's what I want to encourage you with, that truth today that despite all of the things that are happening right now, you, even in this hour, can have peace. The peace that comes through Jesus Christ. Now, I want to give you a little bit of the context, the background of this passage, Jesus' words here in John chapter 16. At this point, Jesus is very close to his final hours on earth. And he's going to be leaving his disciples. They're no longer going to have his bodily presence with them. That's sort of the theme of this section of John's Gospel. It's called the Upper Room Discourse. It's a series of teachings that Jesus gives to the disciples right before he goes to the cross. And it made many of them uneasy. He's going back to the Father, back to heaven, and the disciples are going to be left behind. They don't know what the immediate future holds, and so they're afraid. Now, it's sort of interesting. Leading up to the words that I read in verse 31, the disciples say to Jesus, and listen to what they said to him, "Ah, now you are speaking plainly and not using figurative speech. Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God." It's like the disciples say, hey, Jesus, we get it now. Now we believe in you. And I love the way that Jesus responded in verse 31. He says to them, "Do you now believe?" Almost as if Jesus is saying to the disciples, really? Do you really believe that I am who I say I am now? Do you really believe in me? I think that Jesus' words here could be fitly spoken to most Americans. Did you know that there's been a bunch of research that's been done in recent days that shows that the majority of Americans believe that Jesus actually existed? Over 90% are willing to say, yeah, he was a historical figure. That's not really even something that's disputed. You don't have to be a Christian. Atheist historians, other historians, professional historians concede the reality that Jesus actually existed, that he was a real person who lived. And the majority of Americans say, I believe that. I believe Jesus actually existed. And did you know that the majority of Americans also say, or at least are willing to say, that Jesus was God? Slightly over 50% of Americans. It's higher among the older generations, younger generations like my own, the millennials, and underneath the millennials. A little bit less inclined to say that Jesus is God. But when you take everybody together, the majority of the country is still willing to say that Jesus is God. I think a lot of us are like the disciples here. We say, I believe. And Jesus responds to us, not in an arrogant way, not in a demeaning way. And he says, do you now believe? Do you really believe? You see, faith in Jesus doesn't just mean acknowledging the existence of Jesus or having knowledge about Jesus. Although it's impossible to have faith in someone or something that you don't know anything about, faith is a key, knowledge is a key element of faith. You can't have faith in something that you don't know anything about. At least in the Bible, faith is not so much simply affirming historical facts, it's trusting in and relying upon Jesus. It's receiving him not simply as a historical figure, which is what most people are willing to do, but as the Lord of all creation and as your personal Savior.